Hello, everybody. So today we're back with episode 2 of the Java tutorial series, and we're going to be talking about basic operators and just basic math that's in Java. So just to recap on what we did on the last episode, let's talk about variables. So I'm going to comment variables, and so right here, I'm gonna make an int, call it number, and then set it to 30. So you can make variables of type int and then set those to whole numbers. You could do doubles and then set this to something like pi and then set that equal to 3.14 and then a string name and then set that to my name. So these are the different types of data types that you could work with. There's also chars, character, and then we'll set this to like A, and then you could print out some of these as well. So we could print out number, and so then that's going to print out. So these are the different types of variables and data types that you could make in Java. So today we're not going to be talking about variables, but instead we're going to talk about operators. So in Java, you could do basic math. For example, let's say that we make an int number 1, and then set this to 30, and then another number 2, and then set it to 10. When we call the system.out.println to print something out onto the console, we can say number 1 plus number 2. And that is going to add the actual values of the variables, and that's going to give us 40 because that's 30 plus 10. And now you can also do the addition in when you're making the variables. So you could say 30 plus 10, and that is going to get you 40 as well. There we go. You can also multiply using the asterisk, which is on the 8 key. And if I print out number 1, then that's going to give us 300 because that's going to multiply these two numbers. You can also divide, and that's going to get us 3 because that is 30 divided by 10, which is 3. 3 is stored into number 1, and then we're printing that out. And you can also, of course, use subtraction as well. So there's something to keep in mind here though. For example, for 30 divided by 10, the answer is 3, which that's a whole number, plus that's the correct answer too. But let's say that I'm trying to do 6 divided by 4. So the answer is 1, but that's not true because if you think about it, 4 can go into 6 once and a little bit more, right? So it could go into it 1.5 times because half of 4 is 2. So it's 4 plus 2 is 6. So the answer should be 1.5, but it's saying 1. And the reason that this is going on is because we're working with the ints. So the answer will always be a whole number. But why does this not crash? Well, because in Java, they're going to get the int division from this, and the int will just knock off the decimal. So you don't need to create a double variable, but it's not going to get you the correct answer that you want. So let's say that we want the correct answer. Let's change this to double, but it's still giving us 1. Well, that's because in Java, these values will need to have an actual 0.6, 0.0. Now we're getting the real answer of 1.5. And by the way, both of these numbers don't need to say 0.0. For example, just the 6 can say it, right? And then also just the 4 as well. Now, what happens if we try to change this back to int? You can see that's now red because this is going to get us now an answer that's double, that's 1.5. And now we're trying to put 1.5 now into the int. Now that's a problem because you can't give decimal values to a whole number, which is the int. So that's going to cause an error. But this didn't cause an error because this division will actually give you the int, because this is taking the ints of these two values and then doing the division for those. And this will return 1. So 1 gets placed into the variable number 1, and that gets printed out, which is not the correct answer. And so to fix it, change this to double and then one of these to a 0.0. There's another way that you can do this division though. So I could make another variable of type double and call it number 2 and then set it to 4, remove this, and then call this one, or make it type double, and then do number 1 divided by number 2, and then here, without these numbers having a 0.0, it's going to give us the correct answer. That is because it's going to take the double of 6, which will actually add the 0.0 to it, and then the same for the 4. And so both of these numbers, they have a 0.0. So before printing that out, we could do a system.out.println to see what the value of, for example, number 1 is. And so what's going to show is 6.0. That's because taking the double of an int will just add in a 0.0 to it. All right, so that's working with the basic math in Java. So now let's talk about something called concatenation. So concatenation, that is when you combine two string variables. So for example, let me make a string variable and then call it first name and then set it to John. And then I can make a last name and then set it to John Die. And so here, let's do a system.out.println first name. And so if I'm trying to print out first name with the last name, the way that I can combine these two is just by adding a plus sign. And so now I could say first name plus last name, and that gives us John Die. However, there's no space between these names, so you're going to have to add a space. The other way that you could do this though is that you could just do first name plus last name and then give the last name a space as well. There we go. All right, so that's enough for concatenation for Java. Now let's talk about another operator that's in Java called mod. So mod is going to give you the remainder of division. So for example, let me do a printout, and I want to print out 6 mod 2. This is going to print out the value 0. The reason because of that is because 2 could divide into 6 evenly into a whole number. For example, 6 divided by 2, that is 3. And so because of the fact that this will equal to a solid number, that means that there's no remainder. So now let's try to take the mod of a number that will not divide perfectly, like 6 and 2. Let's try 7 and 2. And let me make this a comment. So now there's a remainder of 1 because 2 does not divide evenly into 7. And that's because the answer is actually 3.5. So because of that, it's not going to divide evenly. So why is that? For example, 2 times 3 plus 1. This is the math required for 2 to equal to 7. You're going to have to multiply it by 3, but because it doesn't go evenly into it, you're going to have to add 1. This remainder is what's going to be printed out. So let's try 13. So 2 times 6 is going to get you 12. And then you're going to have to add 1 to it to get to 13. and that is why 1 prints out. Let's try 5 times 2, that's going to get you 10. And now 10 plus 3 is going to get you 13. And so that means that the remainder is 3, so the printout will say 3. So this is the way that mod works, and it's actually very useful for us because let's say that we're trying to figure out if a number is odd. So an odd number, for example, 13, modded by 2 will always give 1. But a number that's even, like 10, will always give 0. That is because 2 can divide evenly into any even number. So let's say that we have 34 and we're trying to check if that's even. So mod it by 2. So if the answer is 0, then the number, that's even. Since that's 0, we know that 34, that's even. So with that said, I hope you guys learned a lot from the video. If you liked it, please give a thumbs up and stay tuned for the next video. Thank you guys. I'll see you next time.